everyone. I am very excited today to be on stage with two amazing founders whose startups are all about impact. On the one hand, climate impact. On the other hand, social and economic impact. Johannes is the CEO and co-CEO and co-founder of Neustark, and Amer is the co-founder and CEO of Nsave, which is formerly known as Nsave. You know, as tech investors, I think we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to invest capital where it matters most. And at ACE, we take this very seriously. We invest on behalf of individuals, of families, of institutions. And our objectives are clear. It's first and foremost to deliver outsized returns to our investors, but at the same time, we should be investing capital in companies that are making a great impact in the world. And I think in this discussion today, I would really like to show that doing both is actually very possible, and that entrepreneurship is, to me, one of the purest ways to make a great impact in the world. So, without further ado, I'd like to start this session with Johannes. Could you please tell us more about yourself, who you are, and what is Neustark?
Yes, of course. So thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Johannes Tiefenthaler. And so I want to start saying a few words about Neustark. So what we do is that we generate negative emissions by first taking CO2 from the atmosphere and fixing it in concrete. And what we do is that on the one hand, we supply the technologies. So we physically build this value chain. Then we operate it and we basically integrate it into a business model that everyone along the value chain can actually earn profits by operating it. And so how did I come across this? And this actually happened in 2017. Back then, I was a student at ETH Zurich studying mechanical and process engineering. And it was just after the Paris Agreement where it was clear that in 2050 we need to remove about 10 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere annually. And it was also clear that nothing was happening in this field back then. There was basically no financial incentive to do anything. And this was, I would say, striking for something which has to be a $1 trillion industry in 2050. And this basically, and what I did afterwards is that I actually started developing first technologies in my PhD thesis to fix CO2 in concrete. And I did this with the intention to generate climate impact. And the only way to generate climate impact is making a business out of climate impact. And this was, I would say, the guidance there. And quite early on, I met my co-founder, Valentine, who was working, funnily, on the same thing, but basically from the business side in the same city. And we joined forces, and now there is Neustark. So right now, we are about 40 people, having 10 commercial plants in operation, mostly in Switzerland. Going this year to Berlin, commissioning the first plant there, and removing CO2 today.
Wonderful. Amer, what about you? Please tell us more who you are and what do you do today with Nsave?
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Amer Baroudi, born and raised in Damascus. I'm Syrian. For all of you bankers, I'm high-risk client by virtue of passport. Lived there all my childhood and left after the war. Discovered entrepreneurship because no one hired me, actually. That's really how I stumbled into that. But then had the privilege to get a Rhodes Scholarship, move to Oxford, study there, and then just got frustrated by not being able to access banking. And now I'm CEO of Nsave or Nsave. And what we do is we help people who come from distressed economies where inflation is high and banking is terrible, protect their savings abroad. So think of offshore banking that high net worth individual from Lebanon maybe might access to avoid 140% inflation, and the terrible local banking but usually a private Swiss bank would demand a very high minimum deposit. We found a way to democratize that and make it happen to the middle class. So that's what we do.
And why do you do that? Why do you do what you do? How come you're actually founding a company to actually, you know, what is driving you?
Got a story for you. 2013, I was on a flight from Dubai to Istanbul. My next stop was a bus to Bulgaria. I was about 20 years old. That was my only hope to go back to school after I had to leave the country. I taped my life savings on my body on the flight. I had no other option because no bank banked me in the Emirates. For 2 years, I worked in the black market. My heart was trembling because I was thinking, what am I going to say when the passport control or the security will ask me, why do I have that money taped on me? I felt like a drug dealer. I remember as well my dad trying to move his savings to avoid crazy inflation back in 2012. No bank banked him. Swiss banks said yes. One condition, minimum deposit $1 million. And just like us, there are millions of people today that don't have access to safe banking. From Lebanon to Argentina, to Turkey now, to Egypt. It is a massive problem. And what bugs me and makes me frustrated is that there is a legal and compliant way to solve this problem. It is a tough challenge, but that's what excites me about it. And that's why we're doing it.
It's a great story. Johannes, you're founder of a company that it seems that what you're doing is actually quite complex. You're taking CO2, you're liquefying it, you reinject it into recycled cement, and all of this is great. Seems like you wanted to make an impact in climate. Why do you think that you went into the entrepreneurship journey to actually make an impact?
So that's a great question. So I think so the challenge back then was that no one, or I would say no one in this space, so negative emission technologies tried to make a business out of negative emission technologies. And I think, so entrepreneurship back then was the only way to go there, and it has, I would say, one key strength, and that's focus. So if you found a company which focuses on solving this problem of generating negative emission, you're going to do everything possible to make it real. And this focus was actually our strength so far, and this was also why we are where we are, because it gives us speed, it gives us purpose, and yeah, we are fully using that, as I think other entrepreneurs as well.
And you're delivering negative emissions. That's what you're doing. Can you tell us more about like where you stand today versus what we should be at if we wanted to reach net zero quite soon?
Yeah, so this whole industry is really, I would say, at the beginning. So right now, so far we have removed about 300 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. That's technical, high-quality removals. We're among the biggest suppliers globally. The market is, or I would say, the volumes delivered today are tiny compared to the 10 billion tons where we have to be in 2050. And what's very important for climate tech is that you have to show, and that's our ambition, we have to show that our technology can remove emissions at a relevant scale in 2050. And this means that technologies can do that. They need to hit the megaton, so removing 1 million tons of CO2 in 2030. Otherwise, they're not going to reach the 100 million tons or more benchmark, and they are not going to deliver at scale. And if that's the scale, we basically have to refocus. So we have this megaton objective, which we are hitting, and we are, I would say, very confident that we actually get there. And to give you a rationale, so what does a megaton mean? That means in our case, roughly 1,500 to 2,000 plants in operation, so quite a big ecosystem. In Europe, North America, that's the market where this type of material, demolition concrete, is today present at high volumes, and the total investment in CapEx would be in the range of $500 million to $1 billion US dollars. So that's also reasonable comparing it to such operations.
Got it. Amer, can you tell us more a bit about the business of Nsave, because you want to actually make banking accessible for underbanked people in underbanked countries? Can you tell us more about how it works? What's your vision? Where you're at today? How does it work?
Absolutely. I think, yes, we are impact-driven, but we're also building an incredibly massive business alongside doing impact. And for us, I mean, the way I've always thought about it, right, there are about 50 million people that need this in the world. They have an average life savings of 30K. If 1% interest earned alone on these deposits, and I bet we can make much more for the next 10 years, but that's $15 billion on interest alone. And the vision for this is to build the platform for people, especially if they come from countries that are distressed, to protect their savings, but then grow their wealth. Because step number one, the pain point is, do I have a safe place to keep my savings? But this also means I don't have access to investment products, insurance products, savings products, so we want to build that platform focused on the savings and wealth side of retail banking. And the beauty of it is that we make more money when our users save and make more money. That's what I love about it.
Understood. Johannes, can you tell us more about how the economics work in your business? How does it? It's quite I find it quite complicated, but the beauty of it is that it's not only something that is economically very viable, but also very impactful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm happy to do so. So basically what we do is that we first sell a CO2 storage plant to a customer. They are typical concrete recyclers. And this is an investment of, let's say, $500,000 to $1 million. And afterwards, we do the same with basically CO2 sources. And as soon as the infrastructure is in place, we have a long-term collaboration agreement where we basically pay the single stakeholders of the value chain for delivering, transporting, and storing the CO2. And in the back, we have customers. These are certificate customers which basically either want to compensate their own emissions, which are not avoidable, by purchasing negative emission certificates, or there are compliant schemes like, for instance, in Europe, Renewable Energy Directive 2, or in the US, you have 45Q or similar, under which you can basically valorize these credits. And credits are nothing else than a proof that this climate impact actually happened. And this is how the value chain works. So in the end, the price of the credit is, I would say, it depends on the margin of the single stakeholders. But what we can say is that we are compliant with large-scale carbon capture and storage value chains, where they basically decarbonize industrial emitters like cement, steel, or I would say chemical industry. So we are, would say we are cost competitive compared to that. We have a smaller scale, but we have shorter transport distance, and I would say more local value creation.
Do you feel any tension between delivering impact and driving, healthy economics and profit to the company? How does that tension? Is there tension, and how does it work?
So I think there is, for sure, at the one side, a certain tension, because, for instance, if you sell a plant, they expect a certain payback. And if the payback period is longer, you basically, let's say, have more operating margin, or you have, let's say, more money to be invested in other topics. So I would say there is for sure a certain tension, especially today, because this business is in its infant phase. But on the same time, if you look at the Neustark economics, basically every ton of CO2 removes generates profits. So I would say that scales very well. So there we are very well aligned, and the other part we will manage.
One question for the both of you. How do you think about hiring? I always think that the caliber of people is the single most important factor when it comes to the success of a company. How do you think about hiring in terms of culture fit, in terms of the impact versus skill set, and all of those things in companies that have reached a certain size for you, and that is going to market for you, Amer? Maybe you want to start first?
Sure. I think no compromise on skill set. That's just a given. We want to work with the best of the best, and we can't compromise on that. Now, the culture fit and that impact aspect And I know a lot of people sometimes confuse culture and talk about it as like some sort of big thing. But what we try to do internally is really anchor the culture, whether it's the values, and explain how they are, and then benchmark them to how decisions are being made in reference to these values. So let's say if we are an inclusive company, when we are assessing someone, we are trying to find history where this person made decisions that align with that value. Yep. And then try to assess, do they actually care about the impact, and how did they care about impact? And by asking more questions and more details. And honestly, like, sometimes you do 10 interviews, but there's always that person when you close the first interview and you're jumping, you're like, I need to hire this person. Yeah. And you feel like, okay, they got the skill set, they're so excited about it, they want to be part of this, and you just get them on board. Yeah.
That's great. What about you, Johannes?
Yeah, I agree, and I think impact companies like we are, they have a big benefit that actually would say a big crowd of people wants to work for us, because they do not only get paid for that, but they also have a purpose in the job. And we realize that very much in recruiting, that we have a lot of applications because we have the purpose. We also give them a lot of responsibility, and this actually helps finding the talent we need in order to grow at such a speed.
I'm going to ask you one last question before we go to audience Q&A. How do you guys pick investors? I remember very clearly when we were discussing it together for the both of you guys, it was, you were very picky when it comes to investors. You were really doing due diligence call with other companies that we worked with. How do you think about the importance of your investors, and what do you expect from them? Johannes, you want to?
So, I think important about investors is what's the preconditions? We have to be aligned on the vision. So, and that's a precondition. I think then afterwards, relationship is very important, and the feeling that they actually want to come on the board to support us going in the right direction. And what we are looking very much is for support, but at the same time freedom. So in the end, we are running the business. We want to make the decisions, and that's very important for us.
I completely agree. I think the alignment on the vision is a big part of that. I think also the dynamic and the relationship between the investor and the founder. I always appreciate when investors help me when I ask for their help. I think that's amazing. Sometimes investors are very keen to tell you how to do things, which is great, right? Getting the advice is amazing. Yes. But that dynamic and that relationship, and also seeing an investor that actually is excited about what we're building and them wanting to be a part of the journey, that was good. I mean, we were privileged to turn down several investors. We were lucky in our round, but that kind of keenness to help and being ready to support in any way possible. And Ace, honestly, I always tell Alessandra, she's incredible. I mean, I send an investor update every month, and the first person to respond of how we can help is usually Ace and company.
It was great to hear that.
Okay, Amer, Johannes, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.